So can you hear me? Yeah. Much better. Thanks a lot. Now we have the famous hour after the lunch, so it's a good time for sleeping. Don't be careful with your neighbor. But I want to make an exercise with you. Our topic is challenges and opportunities of technological transition and digital economy. And before presenting our excellent speakers, I want to make an exercise with you, and it is very simple. How many persons are you? Now, for doing so, I invite you to keep up your cell phone. Just make that like that. So I see everybody has devices like this, and here we are in the middle of technology. Because how many persons are we? Well, I have been reading a judgment in the United States. There has been a hit-and-drunk driver. He was in a cell, and he was one night over there, and they took away his cell phone. So he said, okay, that I had to pass one night in prison, this is okay. But that you took away my cell phone, this is against my personality rights because it's part of my personality. Okay, the interesting thing is the court said, oh yes, you are right. This gave me the occasion to reflect about these technological changes, and we'll discuss a couple of aspects in here. So the person who we are. Today we are already a hybrid existence, because one is the physical person, yourself. This, how much of yourself is in here? I think a lot. It's a lot of personal data, it's a lot of your personality. So this is your persona too. And no, don't forget, we all have been reading Sigmund Freud about the subconscious and the unconscious, and well, fortunately, we have that as well, because in this sky, it's called cloud, we have some information on us, which is the third person, personal three, and part of that is subconscious. You can ask and you get the data, and some of that is unconscious. You don't know even where to ask, you don't know even where the data are, and you don't know even where to use them. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this forum about technology. So think about which person is there. Thank you. We shall make a very short presentation of the people here on the forum, which is Monika Maurer. She is CEO of Radio Frequency Systems. Maybe she tells us more about that. And she has a lot of other important functions in the industry. And we are very happy to have her here because she, in a sense, is the practical voice, because it's very important to be practical and down to earth. We have Eric Salobir. Here, he is the director and president of the executive committee of the Human Technology Foundation. You see the word human plays a role even in digital times, so it seems to be quite important. And we have Jean-Pierre Casey here at the right. He is the CEO of RegHedge. This is a hybrid fintech startup, and he's also part of the investment committee of the Vatican. So we have a series of aspects in here, but the real question is, should we be afraid of digital technology, yes or no? Stefano Zamagni this morning has been talking about the transhumans and the Singularity University. Well, people who really are in the industry are not that much afraid. This is really an elite phenomenon, I guess, but we can discuss that because in the real world, what we rather do is we distinguish between strong AI, artificial intelligence, and weak AI. And normally, this simply helps us for doing everyday work. But nevertheless, I think it's a short introduction. We should have some statements in here. Still, I think we should also start with one strong point. If you look at the social doctrine of the church, you'll find a lot of fantastic things. And we have especially our three principles: the person, so personality. You have the society and the state, solidarity. You have the right place for responsibility between central and decentral, and in the company, in the organizations, which is subsidiarity. But we did not hear a lot in the social doctrine of the church on the digital ages. And maybe we can expect less than 100 years in order to hear something about that. We don't know if we should wish that, because technology really is very rapid. And it's one of the big challenges we have in this field, that you have a development, and only years later, you find out how to deal with this development in society. Now we know if you have hate speech or fake news, well, there are some rules in the world, and we have different ways to deal with these rules. It's one part of this phenomenon. If you look at the US, at Europe, and China, in China you have the patronizing state. You have a social score, you have, let me say, 500 points, and Rolando, if you park wrong, you get 1 point less, so 499. Now, maybe you don't pay rent probably, but if you would pay rent and you would not pay the rent or pay it late, 20 points less. Then one day you want to go to a train or to an airplane, and they will tell you, oh, Rolando, your social score is only 378. Sorry, you can't book a flight. You're dangerous for the public. We know that already. We don't need social scoring. So, Rolando, sorry about this joke, but it's not a joke. It's a way of really steering the society with a social score and having the state really mobilizing all data. If you sell any car in China, you have to transmit the car mobility data to the state. This is the Chinese solution. If you look at the American solution, especially, we have business models. Data are money, and aggregated data are aggregated money. So to say, you can do that, but is that all? In the European Union, we try to do something different with a lot of bureaucracy. We see, okay, we have privacy, we have our own data, but who really owns the data? And what should we do with the data? And what does data literacy mean? How does that transfer to the people in the road? It's not an easy question. So I think it's a field, an open field for the social doctrine of the church in the future. And I want to finish this small introduction with one idea I gained when I have been writing my book, Critic of Digital Reason. It has been translated into Spanish, Crítica de la Razón Digital. So if you'd like to read it in Spanish, it's possible. And the idea was, in the end, this world should be of human beings. It should be with dignity. So we need a humanistic imperative for the digital world. This means, very simple, does a digital application, a digital device, promote or hinder integral human development? A very simple thing, and we can discuss about that, what does it mean? But I think this is the big challenge for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And this is to give you a little wrap up. We did not discuss until now labor, we did not discuss cyber currency, a lot of things, but we'll have that because we have an excellent podium, and I would like to start with some, initial remarks from the side of Monika, please.
Thank you very much. And to complement what you said, Ulrich, my background is telecommunications industry. I will not bother you with too many technical details here, but then you have the context on where I'm coming from. But I'm a Christian business leader. And as Christian business leader, what matters a lot is a value-based leadership principles and leadership system. And maybe you are surprised when I'm now saying in the world of digital economy, this matters even more. And you will see how and why. So as I'm representing here the enterprise, I will share with you more in terms of a very basic introduction of what are we talking about here. And let me start by saying this is really offering great advantages from an enterprise perspective, because the opportunity in quality improvement and efficiency improvement by using AI-based systems is enormous. But what are we really talking about? And you all showed your mobile phone earlier. Based on the mobile phone, many of you are using voice recognition or face recognition systems every day without thinking about it's an AI-based system. So there it starts. But I want to give you a few more examples so that it's becoming more tangible for you what we are talking about here. I am sure that many of you have experience on very basic translation systems. And these poor early kind of translations were really ugly, hard to read, a lot of fun, sometimes not easy to understand. But that's one of the applications where a lot of evolution has taken place recently. And to give you a flavor, the so-called EU Council Presidency translator used by the EU is now active and is allowing really to manage all official 24 languages of the EU. So what an evolution as compared to these very early systems. Important also the quality control. And imagine kind of a person in a production line. And in the past, I had workers who were doing nothing but the whole day, 12 hours, looking at printed boards in order to recognize is there a mistake. These people were quite good and advanced in being able to do that for 12 hours a day, but this kind of, it's still not clear whether the, let's say, accuracy is 100%. And these kind of quality systems are now done by more or less sophisticated AI-based systems. You don't need that anymore. And the quality of the output is not comparable to the fact if this would be done by a human being. Also, this goes more and more far advanced. Look at online monitoring system in complex productions. And I'm also linked to paper production, and these huge machines with very high speed and high quality output are also controlled by such kind of quality improvement and permanent online monitoring systems, just to give you a flavor. Another area where all of you are familiar with, garbage sorting systems, in what can be recycled, what cannot be recycled, are other examples. And I think you start to feel and to see that AI is everywhere already. And I think some basic understanding of the applications, but I can tell you these kind of systems are advancing as we speak. And they are more and more complex on one side, but also more and more advanced in making our life easier. But let me share with you some applications maybe you are not yet aware of. For example, AI is now more and more used in the context of insurance companies in order to let all the so-called basic cases be managed by a machine. And small damages on a car, whatever that means in terms of consequences, is very easy to filter out. And then for the human interaction and intervention to leave the more complex cases for those. Also, sorting of incoming mails can be done by a machine. Or in the medical area, there are plenty of applications. A human eye is only able to, let's say, distinguish between, let's say, 25 or whatever shades of gray, whereas such a machine is able to interpret and to detect and to find more than 200. And I'm traveling a lot, dreaming about a next evolution of AI, making the security control at the airport being replaced by a machine in order to make it more efficient. Unfortunately, we are not yet there. But you see already with these last applications and examples that we are touching here a bit the limitations of this system and also the area to ask ourselves how far to go. But before we get there in more details, let me explain to you also on what are the basic principles on how are these kind of systems being built. And it's a bit oversimplified, but imagine there are two steps. First, a clear definition phase, based on which the application is being defined, and the basic algorithm is being developed. And this definition phase and first phase is followed by a learning phase. And that's where the AI term is coming from. And by using and during this learning phase, these systems are being tuned and improved and better and better. So the learning phase is during this dedicated, you can also call it testing phase, in which this, with each step, an element of learning comes into, and then the system overall improves. But let me also share with you a well-known example so that it's for you a bit more better to understand what are the risks and the opportunity of this learning phase. Another application is to select the best candidate in terms of what is the profile for a certain company which suits best for an open position. And this is really an application, but when one company first starting by using this application, then recognized after the first testing phase, something is strange. Because by coincidence, or nobody knew at the beginning why, only white male at the age of maybe between 40 and 50 have been selected. Strange. Is there no female opportunity for that position? Where was this coming from? Simple, because during this so-called tuning and learning phase, the company used the current employees and the data of the employees, more or less male at the age of, and therefore you see now the limitations if you are not accurate in how you specify this learning phase. The system at the end will learn in the wrong direction and fail. And therefore, this is to give you a bit of a flavor of what are the limitations of this artificial intelligence. And I think it also shows to you what is now our responsibility dealing with the digital economy as leaders. What is very important, as I mentioned to you earlier, people will lose their job and there are other ways, so it's very important that we get the employees involved, that we share what is happening, what are the opportunities, and how this is going to evolve. And on the other side, we have to be very much involved in what criteria to be applied, because we will have quite some discussions here in how far does that go. And we also touch areas where you need to ask yourself the question, is this the way we want to take? And do we want to go as far as that? But I think that's a good transition now to introduce the next speakers. And I stop here with my basic introduction.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Monika. As you can see, we have a lot of questions. New technology, what is learning? Is machine learning really learning, or is it just the imitation of learning? What is the effect? Who takes the decision? Who is responsible for decision making? Who takes the decision for an ethical bias in online recruiting, for example? How can we arrive at something like ethics by design? Who decides what? What happens if a doctor, very well-trained doctor, radiologist, knows I'm very experienced, I think this is the case, but the machine tells me that is the case. Will the insurance accept his opinion, yes or no? So you can see we have some simple questions which in the end are not as simple as that. I would like to go now for another practical voice, and I would like to give over to Jean-Pierre before ending up with a little bit of a philosophical stance.
Yeah, I don't know if mine is a practical voice. It will be also a little bit
Sure.
philosophical, I suppose, but I'm weaving in some practical elements as well as a practitioner. But it's obvious to all of us that today we are in the midst, we're in the throes of a major technological revolution. It has been called the fourth industrial revolution. And apart from the fact that this industrial revolution, this fourth industrial digital revolution, has fundamentally changed the way that we communicate, the way that we do business, and so forth, there is a major eschatological struggle that is playing out before our very eyes in the midst of this fourth industrial revolution. And what is that eschatological struggle that is playing out before our eyes? It is that there are two radically competing visions of what it means to be human that are competing for the future. On the one hand, we've got the Christian anthropology, man created in imago Dei, in the image and likeness of God, that loving filial relationship, endowed with an infinite dignity and worth from conception until natural death, because we are created in the image and likeness of God. And competing with that Christian vision of the human person is the technocratic paradigm of progress. Progress becoming an end in and of itself. Progress as a religion. It is what I call messianic humanism, where the salvific sacrifice of Christ is redundant because man will become his own savior. Technological and technocratic solutions and innovations will save mankind. Sometimes we are guilty of elevating these innovations and solutions to sacramentals. We are considering these new technologies as sacramental instruments of the new secular religion, where man becomes his own savior and Christ is redundant. And sometimes we do this even at the expense of the human person. We sacrifice the human person on the altar of technology. We sacrifice the human person on the altar of science. And underpinning this is a very cynical view of the human person. There's no better way to express this than the way that Yuval Harari, the transhumanist provocateur and World Economic Forum exponent, has said about what he sees as the future. He says, humans will become hackable animals. The whole idea that humans have this soul, that they have this spirit, that they have free will, and nobody knows what's happening inside of me, so whatever I choose, whether it's elections or whatever I pick at the supermarket, that this is my free will, he says, that's over. That is gone. He says, governments and corporations will soon know you better than you know yourself. Now, not only is this picture that he is coloring alarming and dystopian, it is a radical perversion of the biblical understanding that there is only one who knows us better than we know ourselves, and that is our Creator. Luke 12:7, I counted the number of hairs on your head. Jeremiah 1:5, before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I consecrated you. And as St. Augustine says, intimo meo et superior sumo meo. God is more intimate than our most intimate self. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and he is higher than our highest self. New technologies come with opportunities and risks. I don't want to paint too much of an alarmist picture, but I focus very deliberately on some of the dangers of the new technologies because I don't think we sufficiently appreciate what this means for the future of the human person and of humankind. New technologies have the ability to enable or to enslave. And the more powerful the technological revolution, the more powerful the technologies, the greater their ability to enable us to effect change for the common good. And the greater also their ability to control, subdue, subjugate the human person. In the first industrial revolution, the collective sin that was embedded in societal and economic structures was the sin to reduce the human person to a factor of production. And in the fourth industrial revolution, the collective sin is reducing the human person to a factor of consumption. And not only are we reducing the human person to a factor of consumption, we are transforming the human person into a product. You and I are the products of the fourth industrial revolution. We are the product that is being manipulated, that is being monetized with mass data harvesting, sometimes and very often without our knowledge and consent. So we have become a product, and the real risk of this fourth industrial revolution is the ultimate commodification of the human person, the objectification of subject. And when we make of the economy a false god, and when we make of technology a false god, it is inevitable that human rights abuses ensue. Mass digital harvesting of data, building digital profiles of human beings without their knowledge and consent, facial recognition technologies, digital currencies and programmable money where central banks will be able to say, as an expression of a central bank liability, a digital currency can only be used to purchase certain goods and services. Or the central bank could say, that digital money will expire within the next 3 months. Biometric sensors, digital IDs and so forth, we see an expression of this in the Chinese Communist Party with a social credit score. This is the ultimate subjugation of the human person. When our Lord created the universe, he said, go and fill the earth and subdue it, not subvert it. And the danger of these technologies is that they can fundamentally subvert human nature. Why and how? By usurping our free will, by usurping our ability to choose between right and wrong, by nudging us, influencing us, censoring us. Algorithms with reinforcement biases can perhaps contribute to a virtuous cycle of performing more good deeds. But equally, they can contribute to a perverse, vicious cycle that undermines human agency, that undermines human free will. Think about someone who might be sort of tempted or struggling with pornographic addiction. They might not even be looking for this content, but that content might appear, reinforcement biases. That is removing an element of free will from the person. So I will conclude just on this note. The first major technological revolution that I found in the Bible is the story of the Tower of Babel. It's very interesting to read the story of the Tower of Babel because they reference the materials they used to build the tower. They said, come, let us build with brick, not stone. Brick is much cheaper to build with than stone. It can be produced on site. You can build higher towers with it. So in a way, this was the first technological revolution. And what was the consequence of that technological revolution? Whose purpose was, read Genesis 11, so that we can make our name for ourselves. The subjunctive of purpose, the purpose of the tower was to make a name for ourselves, to put man on the throne of God. The opposite of the Tower of Babel, the technological revolution, is Pentecost, the spiritual revolution. The technological revolution of Babel was hope turning into fear. And Pentecost, the spiritual revolution, is fear turning into hope. So final word, the conference's title, Courage to Change. Let us look to Mary, Mother of the Church, who was at the heart of the church, who was there at Pentecost, and through her example, we will be able to undergo that spiritual conversion. And it's only once we have undergone that personal spiritual conversion that we can convert the technologies and the use that we make of them.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. As you can see, there are lots of different points of view. But going back also to our technology, if you would upload my brain in this moment for the next 5 centuries, there's no use of that, because already now, half a minute later, I'm thinking differently. So what's the heck with my brain 1 minute before? And really, we evolve. We are learning. And learning, now this is, I think, the occasion, before I give the word, of course, to our friend Eric, to understand that we evolve. This is a living evolution. Learning means different things from machine learning. Learning is, Rome is the capital of Italy. This is the kind of learning you have easily in the digital world. understanding that French, Italian, and Spanish have the same roots. This is understanding something, learning level 2. But there is a third level of learning, and you alluded to that. The third level of learning is learning about our name, learning about our identity. Sometimes in our life, we know we are part, let me say, of the German, the Spanish, the Italian language community. We are a boy or a girl or whatever. So we learn about ourselves. And this kind of identity learning creates in us a space of memory and a space of future, which by definition is not there in the same sense in this digital world. At least this is the thesis. Maybe we can discuss that also on contradictory terms, but I think the digital world, digital transformation helps us to understand better what is really specific in the human world. And this leads me exactly to Eric's contribution, because I know that he will help us to understand also the space of Christian faith in artificial intelligence.
Thank you very much. Not easy to speak after you two, because it was really very good and smart. Hello, everybody. So actually, we are supposed to speak about AI from the point of view of the Catholic social teaching, but my problem is that I consider that artificial intelligence does not exist. So it doesn't start so easy for me. And a friend of mine who's currently running the autopilot system at Renault, the French car maker, used to say, artificial intelligence does not exist, and the proof is that we will never have autonomous cars with this current technology for a very simple reason: it's traffic jam at peak hours. I mean, just imagine what happens in France. We have a place around the Arc de Triomphe. Cars coming from all around is just like a big mess. There's no rules. You cannot code that. You cannot predict. It's just like hectic human beings. And you cannot see how and predict how people will react. You just need to guess. You just need to imagine. And you cannot know if, for example, someone has the kids yelling in the back, or someone is just saying, oh, that's my wife's birthday, I've completely forgotten the flowers. And so he's just figuring out how to survive coming back home without the flowers. And so he drives hectically, and that's the way we are human beings. On one side, for sure, we're predictable on social networks, for example, and Facebook can predict, for example, if you're pregnant, something like 1 week or 2 weeks before you say that to your partner. So that can be predicted, but globally speaking, I would say generally speaking, humanity is too hectic to be clearly predicted, and the artificial intelligence is not intelligent. Let's be honest. I mean, I agree with Monika. For sure, it can do a lot, but in silos. Face recognition recognizes faces. Voice recognition does the same for voices, and so on. But all together, they never jump from one silo to another. And that's what makes us very special as human beings. We're able to do all of that together. And also, we don't have only like a theoretical or logical intelligence. We also have a more emotional one, and even a spiritual one, for sure. And for sure, an AI can identify, for example, stress in the voice of a candidate or a patient, but it cannot feel stress. It cannot be stressed. And so it will never react the same way as we do. And this is what we call intelligence. So actually, I would say that we have to be cautious not to be afraid by something that does not exist, or at least yet, and probably will not exist for a while. So at the same time, I agree that this technology, artificial intelligence, that we call artificial intelligence, so all the data-based and algorithm-based technologies, are at the same time very powerful, versatile, so you can find them everywhere, and pretty mature. They are not anymore in the laboratories. They are on your phone, in your tablet, in the cloud, everywhere. That's for sure. And one of the questions, I mean, for an entrepreneur is how I will use it. Wherever you come from, you will very soon have to use it, even if it's not right now. And the point is, you can use it in different ways, and perhaps the more spontaneous one is just to replace the human being. I mean, my call centers cost a fortune. I can replace part of the people by chatbots. My employees in the warehouses cost a fortune, and they are on strike and so on. So I can replace them by robots. And it's not only for blue collars, it's also for white collars. And so many people could be replaced, and we could consider that actually the human being is just obsolete. But actually, the point is, it is your responsibility or our responsibility to be creative in that way and to promote more empowerment than replacement, because with the same kind of technology, you can also empower the employees of your company to do much, much better. And so that's exactly what we have to have in mind. Who's at the center? Is it the machine or is it the human being? And it's a very practical question. Everybody, I guess, here has watched the movie Modern Times with Charlie Chaplin, and Charlie Chaplin is just trying to keep on with the machine and follow the rhythm of the machine. But actually, that's what's happening for most of us. I mean, there's a rhythm which is dictated by the technology, and we have to follow the rhythm. But at some point, perhaps we need to change our mind and consider that the machine has to help us and to be adapted to our own rhythm. And I think that, I mean, yesterday, Pope Francis emphasized the fact that it's not only your or our responsibility to provide jobs, but also to provide dignity in work. I think that's part of what has to be. Otherwise, I mean, last week I was in Geneva about sustainable finance, and we talked a lot, as we did this morning, about environment. And someone said, but in ESG there's a S, which is social. And if we don't deal with the social part, we got the yellow vests. We got like big strikes, we got with big social problems and so on. So we need to pay attention to that and to be focused on putting the human being at the center. Otherwise, I mean, we are lost. And for sure, I would say there's another characteristic of AI that is also very specific. And this characteristic is that most of the time it's invisible. And that's what you mentioned already, but I would like to emphasize this point. I mean, very often when you buy a train ticket online, when you do something, algorithms are just doing something for you and you don't see it. But it shapes a world around you, and the point is, how can we deal with this world? And if you're entrepreneurs, and if you deliver like services or goods and so on, you have to be part of this world that we're building. And just to make an example, with my foundation, we have a living lab in Paris, and we were working on the specific case of dating apps, because they are very popular among the youth, and say, okay, how does it work? I mean, you get profiles of men or women, and you decide, you choose, but how those profiles are selected? They are selected by an algorithm. There's a machine working in backstage. And actually, the point is, if the machine provides you the profile of the person who will be the man or the woman of your life, you marry him or her, and you leave the app. You're not a customer anymore. You're not interested anymore. But at the same time, if it always shows you profiles that don't match, you feel discouraged, and so you leave the app. So you're not useful anymore. So what they do, they provide profiles that are quasi-matches. So a woman I would like to date, but not to marry with. So they are playing with the feelings of the people, of the users. And this is a real question. I mean, actually, this is, for me, a good example of the way algorithms serve the interests of the people who design them instead of the interest of the people who use them. And so for me, the question is to see, I would say, on one side, who's the people over the machine, so the ones who run the machine, who are the people under the machine, or this gig economy of people working for a machine, a kind of digital proletariat, like in the warehouses, just doing what the machine says to do, but also the people who are behind the machine. And so the people who are behind the machines are the ones who prepare. So I would not say that this technology is bad at all. I think it's even very powerful, but just we need to pay attention of the intentionality, what we use this technology for. And I think it's also very important because this technology challenges also the way we are human. I mean, our anthropology is also challenged by this technology. I mean, you were mentioning the connection with the God. But I mean, open the Bible and read about the false gods. They have a mouth and they don't speak. They have ears and they don't listen. But if you say to Alexa, Alexa, order me a pizza, Alexa orders the pizza. So, I mean, it works. And at some point, perhaps, they are becoming like the new Lara's god, you know, those gods monitoring the household, the family, or protecting the family in the ancient Roman religion. And it means that actually more and more people consider that those technologies are part of our world, they are taking care of us, and at some point, yeah, they are like a little god of the house. And yeah, for sure, we need to pay attention about that. But at the same time, yeah, and you were mentioning like, yeah, you can ask what's the capital of Italy? It says it's Rome, fine. But if you ask to Alexa, what's the capital of Israel? And says it's Tel Aviv or it's Jerusalem. It opens a full world behind you, and this was decided by someone. So the question is, how do we deal with those points? So yeah, I just finished by one, sorry, I'm already late, sorry. I would say just, to my mind, the point is that this technology challenges us. Probably you heard about DALL-E 2. DALL-E 2, it's an AI. You just give a prompt, so a short text, and it makes a picture or a photography and so on. So it replaces the graphic designer, but just in a snap. So the question is, does it mean that creativity is not the privilege of the human being anymore? What defines us? If it's not the word, if it's not intelligence, if it's not creativity? And at some point, I would say we're challenged by such an AI as portraitists were challenged by photography a couple of decades ago. They had to reinvent painting, and we will have to reinvent our humanity. So I would say, if I have just a message, don't be afraid to be challenged by technology, because that also makes us more human. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this was already quite a comprehensive part of how AI changes our world. And it changes the world also of education. It changes the world how we work. Now, there's a very simple test. I ask all the women here to think if they know a man who is not contradictory. If we have a woman who finds a man who is not contradictory, please show up. Okay, we can. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's it. Of course, now I could ask the same thing to the men, but this is exactly the point, because what does it mean? It means that we human beings are flexible in different situations. You mentioned that, the muddling through in different situations. This is specific for us, and this is something where we are superior. And the other thing is, it's very simple. We all learned that cars can run much faster than we do. Simple. So we can also learn that some machines calculate things quicker than we do. But this is a learning process for us as human beings. And before going into the next round, because we want to discuss a little bit, I think we have big consequences for education. We need a new education for digital literacy. And part of that is knowing that you can switch it off, at least by night and at least sometimes. Yeah, this is quite important. The European Charter on digital literacy has very simple questions. The first question is, what can I do with the data? Second is, what should I do with the data? Third is, what I ought not to do with this data. So simple questions, but this is something we can learn as human beings. And I think this learning process means we have to go over with a digital participation, which is important for the youth, but it's also important for the labor. And I think this is, I will make a short discussion in the plan here in our panel, and then go back to our audience with simple questions. Monika, the point here is then how to control AI. You talked about the discrimination. If you have a face discrimination software in a warehouse looking at female persons between 40 and 60, of course your face recognition will be not very good for young African males. But how to deal with this? How can we control AI with this example or others?
I would say, I mean, there are two aspects. First, if we are in charge and responsible for the definition, then it's very important to really look at it from a holistic, to the extent it's feasible from a holistic perspective. And very important is also to be aware of what are the intentions behind. And therefore, us as Christian leaders have to have different values and different intentions. And that's the complexity because not everybody has the same intentions. And we heard earlier about the Chinese social scoring system, just to bring the other kind of aspect here into the picture. These are the risks behind. And very important for us, I think, is beside us to represent the right values, Christian values, and to make sure we look at it from as much as possible holistic perspective, not to run into these kind of risks. We also need to make sure in, for example, education, to make people aware of what are the risks and what is the flip side of the opportunity.
Thanks a lot. I nevertheless guess that companies alone will not do it. They will strive maybe for something like digital fairness, so that customer can recognize they are really fair. But in the end, that's part of our discussions. We also need a new role for the state to understand where we really go and where are the limits of doing things, and where are the limits in different models of society. So this is, by the way, one of the strengths of the Christian social doctrine, that we always see the person and the state or the bigger community, personality and solidarity. But this is also one thing I would, you want to?
Maybe one additional aspect, our responsibility is also to share and to make visible and transparent on what have been the criteria. Also with our customers, because more and more these kind of systems will be applied. But it's critically important for the customer also to be able to judge.
And by the way, this leads me to bring the question, let me say, to Jean-Pierre, because we have, of course, now codes of conduct. For example, fairness, accountability, transparency. These are international standards already now in the AI industry. Of course, who decides? Next question. And who takes the decision for implementation, and how is it being implemented? But having said so, Jean-Pierre, I would like to ask you, what gives us hope in this difficult time with these AI challenges?
That's quite a question for someone who had quite a pessimistic outlook on the current state of affairs. What gives us hope? I go back to one of the points I made a bit earlier, contrasting the first industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution commodified the human person by reducing the human person to a factor of production. And what gives me hope as a student of Catholic social teaching is that modern Catholic social teaching came to the rescue during the excesses of the first industrial revolution. Leo XIII produced Rerum Novarum in 1891, and it was a consequence of the creation, the birth of modern Catholic social teaching with that encyclical, that a lot of societal change was engineered through education and through a new expression, a new way to highlight all of the tradition and the magisterium of the Church about the dignity of the human person and of the worker. And as a consequence of that encyclical, social movements arose and political movements arose, which gave effect to the teachings of Leo XIII. Child exploitation in factories was eventually sort of curtailed by restrictions being codified in law. Minimum wages were introduced, universal pensions were introduced, a social safety net was erected, unions were allowed to be formed. All of this were the fruits or the consequence of, one could say, modern Catholic social teaching. So the hope I have is that with the richness of the magisterium and of the continuing evolving body of doctrine in Catholic social thought, we can reform our economy and our society, and this is what gives me hope. I will just conclude my comment with this statement. There is a mistake, I think, that we often make, particularly in this era. Bertrand Battre gave a very eloquent overview of the past 50 years in the global economy and global financial markets. And he expressed that shift from state-driven economies in the 1960s post-Bretton Woods, and certainly post 1980s, 90s, the liberalization of global capital markets and global commerce and so forth. And with 2008, we saw the reversal of that, where the state was seen as the guarantor of financial stability. The state was seen as the guarantor of public health in COVID. The state is seen as the guarantor of the dignity of the human person and of the worker and so on. But I would consider it is intellectually and morally lazy to outsource to the state our personal responsibility as moral agents. It is incumbent upon every single one of us to evangelize the digital highways, to transform the products, to convert the products and technologies and the use that we make of them. So instead of the state being the first resort, the state should always be the last resort. So regulation is not always the answer. For me, regulation is the last resort. First of all, it should be informed responses by moral agents.
Thank you very much. Of course, the role of the state is under discussion. We have many people who say the state needs a more proactive role in digital times, so it's part of eventual controversies. And I would like now, considering lethal weapons and digital warfare, considering the energy consumption in the digital world, which until now is 8 to 10% of the total energy in this world. So how about talking about greening, but 8 to 10%. So the streaming, Netflix, e-gaming is probably as difficult energy-wise as a flight. So people don't know that, but that's part of the reality. So, or another thing, preventive policing, very interesting. They have statistics, digital statistics, and okay, in your field, where you live, Monika, probably in the next 24 hours, somebody will, steal something or rob something. So we send a lot of police there. Maybe you talk to the police, what happened? Nothing. Yeah. So, but this is really a reality about preventive policing. My question to you, therefore, Eric, is what out of this and maybe others is the biggest challenge we have to face in this digital transformation?
That's a big question. First, to answer about I would say the factor of hope before the challenge, because for me hope comes first, and I would say that actually for me the real factor of hope is just common sense. I mean, we see that the new generation is not accepting this kind of technology as we do as I would say older people, and I think that now we have technologies with technology waves which are so short, so it comes so fast that you can always serve the next one. And we see that with Web3, metaverse, and so on, new things are just arriving that have to be shaped. And this is right now, and I agree that it's the responsibility of the entrepreneurs to do it, and I think that actually that's what can save us. I mean, I'm sure that the human being, which is at the image of God, cannot be commoditized completely. So I think that that's our responsibility to serve those waves, and I think that this way we can change the game. Then if we see I would say you say the main challenges. For me, the challenges are not directly linked to one use or another. For sure, autonomous weapons or the use of AI in justice or police are really tricky because it's a question of life and death. But more generally speaking, the point is just to understand how this technology works and what it cannot do. So for example, if you were talking about the use of AI in justice, I mean, AI is very good for correlation, but not good for causality. So for example, AI can say that half of murders in Northern America involve an African-American man. Does it mean that they are more violent? For sure not. But the machine cannot know that. Cannot know if they are more like living in underprivileged neighborhood, if they are living in violent neighborhood, and so if they are always involved in this kind of violent situations. So the machine cannot make a difference. The machine doesn't have a common sense. And so using the machine like to replace a judge, because that's they try to do in the United States, I mean, it's a huge mistake. And actually, they did that in the beginning because they said they checked that the judges were more severe before lunch than after lunch. Yes, currently you're after lunch, so half of you is quietly sleeping. So probably you will not be so tough than before lunch when you were hungry and so hungry. And so actually, and actually perhaps that's true, but using the technology for this purpose was a mistake. So knowing better the technology helps us to use it on purpose, and use on purpose of technology is always a best way to do. So for me, that's the best way to cope with those challenges.
Thanks a lot for this contribution. I would like now to open up to the public and to the audience, because I know you have a lot of expertise here, and we know also that in some cases we find surprises. For example, if you want to make digital payments, it's much easier in Kenya or in Ghana than in Germany, for example. So you jump development stages, which is very, very interesting. And I would invite now the audience, especially the young persons, especially also the women, to participate, because I think we need different points of view, not just the people here on the panel and those who always speak, but let me say, let us gather some voices from the audience and then collect 2 or 3 of them. Here, do we have a microphone? Yes.
This is a question for Father Eric. When I studied with the Dominicans at Oxford, I wrote my thesis partly on this, on what it meant to be a mystic, kind of the, if we know things in direct revelation with God. This is somewhat analogous to technology. If we only had the technology to download God's thoughts, believe in Him better, and only a few people have that direct influence, so to speak. And what Jean-Pierre was saying about the Tower of Babel made me think of that also. Sometimes in building up our technology, we're looking for some type of high tower, to have some kind of a direct link, direct access to God. Okay, fine, these are great analogies, a good debate, and I actually agree with both of you. I see the good in both of what you're saying. I'm not anti-technology, but I'm also a little bit of that generation of Gen X that didn't have all the technology. So just a little anecdote. When I was a student at Blackfriars in Oxford with the Dominicans, I didn't have the technology to then contact my future wife. You said use websites. I wish I had a website back then. I'd met my wife a year before that in Spain. We lost touch with each other. Thank God I wrote her address down on a napkin, which got inserted into a notebook. And when I sent her an express letter, I prayed to God that she would get my letter. And the point I'm making is it's not about a commodification of man, it's kind of a demystifying of man. Like, we don't understand mystery anymore. We don't leave enough space for God to make things work. If I count on a website, a contact, an email address, I'm not at my knees in the chapel of Blackfriars praying for Gabriela to receive my express mail, not email. So think about that. I would like to hear from both of you on that.
What I can say first is...
Let us have 2 or 3 voices.
Okay.
And then
Okay, can I? Oh, yes, sure, hello. I have, somebody else? Okay, so Nea Brincic from Slovenia. Just to reflect on the previous comment, we did have somebody who downloaded God's thoughts on the tablets. Who was the guy was Moses. So the first tablets that were there, but I was anyway. Yeah, a year old, I guess, but I would ask the panelists: have we not already gone past the point of no return, in the sense of technology taking over, in the next decades, and are we not, with all our efforts, encouraging the technology to take over in one sense or the other? And laziness was mentioned. I think the technology answers very well to
our lazy part of the nature. So consuming less or taking or consuming less energy and giving this effort over to technology. So these are just the comments. Thank you.
Let us take one more and then. Also here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Oud and I'm from Madagascar. I'm asking today about the digital literacy that you mentioned. You say that knowledge and the way we apply our... What?
No, it's about the image.
Okay. Artificial intelligence is really biased to our own experience. When you mentioned about the data being inputted from the people who were white and working in that environment was because that's what they had. And artificial intelligence is meant to tackle issues that are going to be very different from Asia than in Europe or in Africa. So my question is, are there tools or could we develop tools that provide for learning and teaching in such subjective matters that can make it objective for an automation? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now we have 3 questions, and then we go for the next round. And I think here everybody really is eager to say something. You have been asked first, Eric.
Yeah, just 1 second. So just to follow up what you were saying, actually the technology to download the thought of God exists. It's the Bible for sure, and if you read the Bible, I mean, in the beginning, in the prologue of John, in the beginning was the Word, and someone say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was no. And that's the danger, is to consider that we start from something like negative about the technology, and then we're just trying to cope with this challenge. And I'm sure that's not the way we have to see those technologies. For sure, there are some things they cannot do, so they are like reinforcement learning reinforces the tendencies, and we need to know that, that it reinforces the trends. But I would say that, I mean, there's no like breaking point, and it's too late. We've seen with the pandemic that the cards were completely reshuffled in our economy, in our society, and so on. So we will regularly have new opportunities to tackle with those challenges. And for example, something which was for me very strong before the pandemic, all the transhumanists were saying, okay, the guy who will live 200 years is already in the room. And then came the pandemic, and everybody went to the hospital, and then we say, okay, perhaps right now, not right now. But I mean, the hubris can go down very fast, and so we will always have like new opportunities to propose something, really new. Thank you.
So I want to respond to the point about communicating with God. I go back to Yuval Harari and to the Tower of Babel. We like to think, as humans, that we need to build towers and structures to reach God. We think it is dependent upon us to go and reach out to Him and use these technologies to somehow communicate with Him. Yuval Harari wrote a book called Homo Deus. Man, God. Man wants to reach up, wants to ascend, to usurp the throne of the Creator. But the Christian anthropology, the way God communicates with us, is the exact opposite. Et verbum caro factum est. The God-man, Emmanuel, God with us. So instead of Homo Deus, you have verbum caro factum est. God who humbled himself to share in our humanity. And so the beauty of our religion is that it is an incarnate religion. Christ gives himself to us sacramentally, through very tangible, visible signs. Invisible grace, but visible, tangible signs of that grace through the sacraments. And that is the way that we communicate with him. We don't need fancy technologies to do that. This being said, I don't want to appear as a Luddite, technology is not always bad. Technological progress is not bad. In many cases, technologies are morally neutral. Not always, but in many cases, technologies are morally neutral, and it is the use that we make of them which is moral or immoral. That is a very important distinction to make. Absolutely, sometimes it is good. And so I think the most important factor here, when we're confronted with technological revolution, is the cultivation of virtue. This is what is going to enable us to discern whether or not a technology is moral, and whether the use that we make of it is moral or not.
Monika, how to cultivate virtue in your work? And, well, the question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I want to also respond to the question now in terms of did we already pass this point of no return? And let me make maybe a funny kind of reference. For me, digital environment, digital economy is a matter of fact. And it is the next step of evolution. And it's a bit of, we have debates sometimes in terms of the concerns, like, the introduction of train systems, people were also concerned. And I think, and it was dangerous and etc. Yes, you can also be killed by a train. But it's less tangible. And the digital environment, or virtual. And as such, it creates more concerns. Even more, it is important that we try to have more background and that we better understand in order to be more aware and to be able to deal with it, because it is a fact. On the other side, in terms of now creating hope, and in the sense of Eric saying AI doesn't exist, I agree to the extent that it will not replace human beings. It is not a system which is going to replace human intelligence in all the facets we have just discussed, because it doesn't go that far. And therefore, for me, it's also hope in that.
Thank you. Just before going to the next round of questions, you can already prepare. I'd like to come back to the question you made from Madagascar with the data literacy, because behind that we have a lot of questions. I'm working in Tübingen. There we have the biggest European AI research hub, and we introduced from our institute that in the requests for for funding, they have to consider social and ethical considerations of their AI research. And it was a very extremely interesting experience. In the first round, we had one researcher who said, well, I'm an engineer, I have been thinking about that. In my research, there is no social and ethical consideration. Okay, perfect. Of course, we could help them, because then we have made some criteria. And we have seen that in the end, this raised really the level of social consideration in all this kind of research. But the real question behind is, what kind of society you want to live in? This is global civil society. We are in a globalized world. This is not simply one place. We can really, space and time can be bridged with the digital world. And so the real point here is that the digital technology opens up to social and to political questions on a worldwide scale. And this is why it's so important to think about this anti-discrimination ideas and how to build in anti-discrimination proceedings in software. But it's not easy, because the simple question is, who is responsible? The developing engineer, the company, the legislator, the whole world? So this is really a tricky question, and we at least should give the space for opening up that question, because this is the future. I think this is just a big question mark, and of course we need much more research, and we also much more guidance from, let me say, also from our Christian world. I think this is part of the ideas. But let us go to the next round of questions. We had already some here, but we shall distribute the microphones. I've seen Nerid, I've seen another person, I've seen Paul, and I've seen you have been before. Here, yeah.
Thank you very much for this insightful panel. I'm her sister, also from Madagascar. My name is Anne-Laure. I'm asking the question from a perspective of a young person who uses a lot of the internet, and also on behalf of friends that are looking for their identity through algorithms that sometimes they feel they are at the mercy of what is available to them. They fear that they might have free will or free thought patterns when they consume information. So I was wondering, how can we shorten the distance between the designer and the user? Because I do believe it's not the responsibility of the technology being morally just is not just on the user. It's actually on the relationship between the designer and the user. So how can we make this word less opaque for the user, and how can we shorten the distance and democratize an information that is sometimes difficult to understand? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the interventions, comments before, because you pushed me to take out something that I'm from my heart. One question only to share. Are we sure that all what we've been saying until now is asking us to add to all the other institutional partners, the state, the public sector, and not only the responsibility of religions? Are we sure that we, as single entrepreneur, single citizen, are we able to face such huge challenge that political future is asking us? Or we have to promote, as believers, not only Christians, to open this overview towards an opportunity that God offers us? It's only a question that I want to share with you because I don't have yet the answer.
En español. Definitivamente la tecnología ha venido a quedarse y la transformación digital es parte de lo que cada uno de los que estamos aquí como empresarios debemos trabajar para lograrlo. De hecho, si la tecnología la podemos usar para el bien o para el mal y nosotros tenemos los instrumentos y nuestro libre arbitrio es lo que decide, en nuestro caso, como UNIAPAC, cuando tengamos nuestra propia network, vamos a poderlo usar para el bien, para comunicarnos, para mantener las mejores relaciones, para educarnos, etc. Así que tenemos que ver a la tecnología con los mejores ojos posibles y como empresarios participar para ser parte de ese cambio.
So thank you very much for your contribution. I have two small questions. One related to the example of the dating app and the criteria of transparency advocated by Monika. So where does the business model start and where the criteria ends? Because if you take the app, the algorithm you describe, Eric, is a part of business model of the app. But it can also be seen as a criteria. So business model is pretended to be secret, criteria pretends to be open. So when we draw the line? And the second question relates to Laudato Si, where the Pope is very skeptical about the technological paradigm. So how you locate the debate about technology within what the Pope calls, it's not very precise in the text, technological paradigm? And what is the general assessment of the Pope about technology and the relationship between knowledge and technology? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we had some easy questions here, and I'm... Yeah, but this is the challenge. We have to go ahead. And I think I would just start with a very little comment to you, Paul, and then give it again to the panel. I think that's why we are here. That's why we're here as UNIAPAC. That's why we are as individuals. That's why we are here as business persons. And that's also why we are here as responsible citizens. For me, this is the big role of the civil society, the local and the global civil society. We have to open up rooms for a common questioning of these grounds, and then we also will find solutions. But it's not me. I would give it again to the panelists. Monika, maybe you start this time.
Okay, interesting questions, and therefore let me try to give an answer in terms of, are we able to shorten the distance between the designer and the user? I think the answer is maybe sometimes. And on the other side, it is also a matter of awareness that we start to invest and to ask questions on what is behind in order to try to understand. Not everybody will be able to do that, but for me, that's one way of shortening the distance. And a very big important element, and I repeat that, is on one side our responsibility of providing visibility and transparency in how certain parts are being defined, and there we can make a big difference. And on the other side, we also need to learn not to be too naive, because when we see on how, for example, also many young people are sharing openly all their private whatever without reflecting on what they are sharing with the systems, that's something where we can really make them aware of what is the consequence of doing so. And we need to learn to deal with the new digital environment.
And thank you. And by the way, before giving that to Jean-Pierre and Eric, this is one point where the world is different from the standpoint, let me say, of older people and of male and female, because you said about distance between the user and the designer. We know that you have a phenomenon like cyber mobbing. We know that you can work in Photoshop and wherever on pictures, and we know that 80% of young female persons feel their body is incomplete, their body is not perfect. The male young persons are catching up. They also now feel more and more it's not perfect. In my age, I know it's not perfect, but I'm not really bothered too much. So this is really a big difference, and is a big, let me say, space for education. And what I think what we need is spaces for sharing experiences, spaces for an open dialogue. But this is what we need to organize. I think also to organize on level of our federations and our UNIAPAC, because this is a specific contribution of the Christian young world to coping with the digital world, but just for making sure that this is understood, because this is really different from young and not so young, and from male and female in a certain sense. But of course, maybe you made well more also on other aspects. We have the question of religion and so on. So please, Jean.
Well, I will address that question from another angle, the one about the distance between the designer and the user. You know, 30 years ago, there was a curtain called the Iron Curtain, and it was a geographic divide. It was a spatial divide. The divide you're describing between the designer and the user is not a geographic or spatial concept. It's a concept about how the designer and the user interact digitally without ever meeting each other, but there's still a relationship between them behind the new kind of curtain that is the digital curtain. Today we're in the age of the digital curtain, not the Iron Curtain. And we can often hide behind this digital veil between users, so user to user, on Facebook, Instagram, and all these other social media platforms, where we can almost take on a personality which is different from our own incarnated personality. We become someone other that we don't recognize. And we can see oftentimes that social media can bring out the worst in ourselves. And that is not seeing the person behind the digital veil. And the same applies to the designer, so that they have a conversion of heart to not prey upon the user, to view that user as a unit of consumption rather than a person. And it's very interesting to note that Facebook and all the social media platforms have a concept called the walled garden. And the concept of the walled garden is you get behavioral psychologists to interact with your user interface and your user experience teams, so that you use psychological metrics in the way that colors are presented and sounds are presented and the whole layout is presented, so as to capture that user and maximize the time that they spend in your digital walled garden. This is a form of commodification and preying upon the user. And it's very interesting to note that all the titans of Silicon Valley send their children to digitally sanitized schools. So that conversion of heart of the user behind the digital veil, of the designer, to consider the user as a person, even though there's no direct relationship, there is still a relationship with another agent, with another subject behind that digital veil.
Thank you very much. I will answer very shortly so we can have another round of questions. So perhaps 2 short points on the question of reducing the distance. For me, there's only one way to reduce the distance between the conceptor and the user. More users have to be part of the conceptors. And so we need more people from Global South. We need more women. We need more people having a background in humanities. We need more believers among the conceptors and the creators of those technologies. That's the only way for me to reduce that. So that's the first point. The second one is very often we say, oh, there are challenges about technologies. For me, most of challenges about technology are not about technology. They are about business. And it refers to what Paul said previously. Actually, it's most of the time a question of business model. So, I mean, we need to be sure that, I mean, so many people want to act well. The question is not to find, especially about AI. I mean, most of the rules are obvious. If you take all the documents, ethical documents from United Nations, from European Union, from UNESCO, all of them, they say the same. The question is, how do we operationalize that? How do we make it happen? And that's the problem, is very often we don't have the tools, we don't have the metrics. That's exactly what Bertrand said previously. And the point, and that's what we try to do in our foundation, is to provide the tools to help the entrepreneurs to assess the impact of their technology. That's the only way to be sure that we do what we believe in.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have still space for 1 or 2 final questions for going then into a very short final round. It's very interesting here. The gentleman has been there. Yes.
Hi. What I was going to tell could seem something strange. What I understood working the business of business transformation is that normally people build up very strong, simple understanding without having the capability to go in details to understand what is the actual reality. Now, just to be very provocative, I will tell something very, very strange. Normally, people at a certain age are thinking that due to the digital divide, because I am also a very quite old person, okay, we are not obliged to enter within the issues related to the technological deployment and so on. And now, recently, I got an affair where my duty was to understand if people with an high seniority, people over even 70 years old, are actually out of the picture without the chance to be able to operate in the data science business and so on. And what I discovered that the digital divide between generation is somehow not so true and is quite false. And people with a high seniority, not always, in several cases, are the smartest people in the utilization and understanding of the actual things. Why? Because they have a very deep hermeneutical capability. So I could speak a lot about these issues, but the main point is that even if a lot of us are not so young, we have not the excuse to leave technological issues, data science and so on, in the hands of somebody else, young or not. We have the duty to take care of all the experiences that we accumulated in the past that help us to better understand the actual situation, even in a matter that could seem somehow very complex.
Thank you very much for putting the point to the matter of age discrimination or not. I think we have come to an end, but not before having a final statement from all panelists with, again, a very simple question: how to shape the future of AI in a Christian spirit? Please limit your answer to simply 1 minute. This is a big challenge, but we start with Jean-Pierre.
Sorry, how
to shape the future of AI in a Christian spirit? Simple question.
That's very difficult, actually, for 1 minute.
Yeah. I come back to the story of Pentecost, to the story of revolution, spiritual revolution versus technological revolution. We have the blessings of having had very great prophets as Holy Fathers over the past generations, one of whose feasts we celebrate today, John Paul II, St. John Paul II, St. John Paul the Great. But one of his venerable predecessors, Paul VI, in 80 Adveniens, 80th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, made a prophetic statement. He was a prophetic pope in many ways, prophetic about Humanae Vitae, but he was prophetic as well on technology. And in 80 Adveniens, he warns very clearly that man runs the risk of becoming the slave of the objects that he is creating. And the recipe is that this is, of course, entirely preventable. It's entirely preventable through that metanoia, through that conversion of Pentecost, that conversion of heart, which will therefore translate into a conversion of the technologies and the uses that we make of them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, in 1 minute, first of all, about the age gap, I would say for sure it exists, but a couple of years ago, I discovered that my mother was posting pictures on social networks and say, "Oh, Mom, you're very tanned." And she's, "Yeah, I photoshopped it a little bit." So actually, if my mother can do that, everybody can do that. No, I mean, that's not true, and there's a question of digital literacy and so on, but I mean, it's a factor of hope for me. So first point. But the second one is, you said how to shape it in a Christian way. I would say just in being fully humans. If we are created at the image of God, who's a creator, we have to be inventors, we have to be innovative. I mean, that's part of our nature. And for sure, it can drive us to Babel, which will crumble down, and we will build something else. But I think that this is really part of our nature. But the point is, the more we use those technologies, they transform us. So we are produced by our own products. And so the point is just to design products that makes us more human when we use them. That's the point for me.
Thank you. Thank you.
In a pragmatic way, I want to come back to what I stated at the very beginning. I mean, we have a Christian belief and the foundation, and this applies more than ever. And that's, for me, the way how to deal with it. In order to judge ourselves and to remind ourselves on what is our foundation and not to deviate from that in the values we apply and in the way we deal with AI.
Yes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So we are looking for technology of values. Thanks a lot. Humanistic imperative, does we promote or hinder human beings in technical development? Thanks a lot for your attention. I think you have deserved a break. Thank you.
No, we don't have a break.
No, we did not.
Sorry,
Well, that's what I think, and the president decides.
We don't have a break. We are going directly to the next panel.
Oh, okay.
But I just wanted in a little minute to say, I'm very thankful to say that I truly believe that artificial intelligence is not intelligence, as it was said here. It's not something that we have to accept. It's something that we can react and we can dominate and make it the way we think. I have a little problem with things being moral or non-moral, but we'll leave that for another time. I think decisions are moral or non-moral, but probably I'm still needing to learn something. But in any case, I think that the same happened with our companies. We knew that in our companies we should work for people, and sometimes we've worked for money. So here is exactly the same thing. We have to have the courage to change. Thank you.